Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSP Magazine. You're listening to a new Redefining Security podcast. Have you ever thought that we are selling cybersecurity insincerely, buying it indiscriminately, and deploying it ineffectively? Perhaps we are. So let's look at how we can organize a successful InfoSec program that integrates people, process, technology, and culture to drive growth and protect business value. Knowledge is power, now more than ever. HITRUST is a leading data protection standards development and certification organization that strives to safeguard sensitive information and manage information risk for global organizations across all industries and throughout the third-party supply chain. Learn more at hitrustalliance.net.
Imperva is the cybersecurity leader whose mission is to protect data and all paths to it with a suite of integrated application and data security solutions. Learn more at imperva.com.
Asgardio by WSO2 is a developer-focused identity and access management solution. Offered as Identity as a Service, or IDaaS, Asgardio by WSO2 creates seamless login experiences to your apps in minutes.
Here we are. You're very welcome to a new episode of Redefining Cybersecurity here on ITSP Magazine. This is Sean Martin, and today we're looking at the topic of vulnerability disclosure and how that plays into enterprise and commercial and hopefully societal impacts as well. And this stuff doesn't happen automatically or magically. It's a group of people taking the time to identify what's going on and analyze it and present it in a way that it's useful for others to consume. And a lot of work going on in there. And we have two folks who are joining us from the Netherlands, Eward and Lennaert from DIVD and global CSIRT.global. And we're going to learn a lot of stuff today. So I'm very appreciative for both of them joining. Eward and Lennaert, thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Eward, we had a chance to, not too long ago, chat with you about some of your findings from RSA conference. Super insightful episode, and I would encourage everybody to have a listen to that. A lot covered there. And it was during that conversation that I realized we need to have you on again to talk about CSIRT.global. And you brought along Lennaert to join you today. So for those who didn't catch you on the first episode or the last episode, maybe a few words from you or to tell folks who you are, and then pass it over to Lennaert to do the same.
Yeah, of course. So I'm Eward. I spent over 26 years in cybersecurity. I've worked mainly for vendors for over 25 years, working on threat intelligence, anti-fraud space. I've worked for quite a while, worked in 4 different continents, enterprises, large banks, governments, those kinds of organizations. And after a while, after my last gig, I decided it was time to, do something for society, if you will. I reckoned the internet is in dire straits. It's going badly with the internet. It needs some help, and I reckoned I could maybe help out a little bit. And that's when I joined the DIVD, and later, together with Lennaert and 2 others, we founded CSIRT.global.
Perfect. Good stuff. And Lennaert, what are you up to?
In daily life, I work as a security analyst. And, it started out as a hobby of finding vulnerabilities and disclosing them on things like bug bounty programs. And, working as an ethical hacker, you often manage to find vulnerabilities in even the largest companies. And you can get a nice bounty paid for that. But like Eward, I also had a passion to just make society better, make the internet better. And that's how I ended up with the DIVD, where we do this at scale and try to make the internet safer.
And so there's a lot of questions in my head around disclosure and what's legal. And I know there's certain laws in the US that may not apply elsewhere unless you happen to put foot in the U.S. But so I don't know what's the role of DIVD and the work you're doing there with them, and perhaps does it touch on some of the policy and legal implications that might be associated with vulnerability disclosure?
The role of DIVD is mostly doing this at scale and organized. So we're a group of about 100 volunteers right now. And, well, when you put all these amazing people together, then you can do a lot more than we each could individual. So it's just pooling resources, but also as it's volunteer work, when someone's busy and something important is going on, someone else can pick it up because you're not alone. You're not on your own doing this.
Describe to me what's going on there. I've read a few words that stick out to me, like platform and team and reports, and obviously there's a blog that's on the site that helps maybe tell a story in a different way than a report can. So what's the process for what's going on here? Is this driven by bug bounties? Is it just driven by the individuals? What's going on?
It's driven by mostly security industry news, and for one part, like when a new vulnerability is found or is published about, then we can go ahead and scan the internet for this vulnerability and try to identify where it exists and get in touch with the owners of those systems and those responsible for patching them, to remind them to either patch or take other mitigating measures to keep their system safe and stop it from being exploited by, for instance, cyber criminals. That's one part. And there's also a large part curiosity for our own researchers. They might see something in their work or just see something in their personal life and be like, hey, how does this thing work? And then sometimes they find a so-called zero-day vulnerability in it. And then we have the process of getting in touch with the vendor, disclosing it to them, having it repaired.
So clearly the team can discover new vulnerabilities, but this is more about finding known vulnerabilities that are exploitable, right? And helping organizations recognize that they have an exposure.
Yes.
Perfect. How does CSIRT come into play here?
CSIRT, which stands for Computer Security Incident Response Team, is our team where that responds to incidents. So when vulnerabilities are found, they go out, scan the internet, get in touch with system owners, sometimes help them patch with. We don't patch systems for them, but sometimes they might, the owner of the system might ask us, like, okay, what is this? What do I need to do? We try to give them a bit of coaching and help them to get it fixed.
Essentially, trying to be a group of volunteer firefighters on the internet, if you will. And you don't even need to call us. We just show up on your doorstep with fire blankets.
That's right. The alarm bells ring, and here you go. Here you guys arrive, and
yeah, exactly. Or there might even be smoke coming out of the window, and they didn't even know it, and we're still there with the fire blankets. Yeah.
Well, talk to me about that, because I have a nice visual here with that, Edward. And firefighters come with a hose and blankets and maybe some masks to help people escape without smoke inhalation. There's much of it anyway. So what do you bring? Clearly you bring information, but do you also bring tools? Do you bring a hatchet? If
we can, but we like to remain on the doorstep, so we don't enter the house and those kinds of things. You know, we're super ethical in those ways. But of course, one of the, I think, going back 2 steps, there's first, you need to know that there's a fire. And for that, you need to understand what's going on out there. Sometimes we do our own research. We have a research department, and every now and then we find a big fire, and sometimes we find a smoldering fire, which has been going on for years. But since we found it, we can now try to stomp it out. But secondly, then you need to find out where the fire actually is. And that is just as daunting a task as finding out that there is a fire somewhere. It's because of our work, the nature of our work, and the fact that we're trying to do it ethically. We're doing the most, let's say, the lightweight scans we can do. But we do scan indiscriminately. So we scan the entire internet. So when we get our results back, then that is a large chunk of IP data. And then we need to try and find owners for those IP addresses of which we know there's a smoldering fire in there. But then we need to find someone who owns that. And that is the daunting task that we have. So the CSIRT part is that, as we define it, is getting in that scanning data and that vulnerability data and getting it to the owners in whichever way we can. And automated tools, of course, will get us a long way for starters. But then I think everyone knows that if you get an email on your abused email address or on your whatever process you have in place for that, it doesn't get followed up automatically by the processes of the owners. And even going from an IP address to a company or an organization or a domain name is actually not specifically straightforward as well. So there's all kinds of issues involved in trying to find where the fire actually is.
And who to talk to about the fire.
Yes, exactly. And even if you know where to go, then you might still be knocking on a door and it doesn't get open at all. So,
tell me how you can tell if there's a fire, because it has to be more than just that there is a piece of code or a port open that leaves a company exposed. You said you can see the smoke signals, so that some level of indicator of compromise that you're identifying in your scan as well.
Often when information about a vulnerability is published, there's some proof of concept to test your own servers or other servers to see if they're vulnerable. That's one thing. Some software is kind enough to state its exact version number right on the front page, so we can just crawl the internet for that piece of software, get the version number, and we'll know based on version number whether or not it's vulnerable. That's one of the best scenarios, because it means we don't have to run any exploit. Like Eward mentioned before, we try to work as ethically as possible. For instance, we would never use a proof of concept that has a high chance of taking a server down or causing any kind of damage. That's something we're very careful about. So yeah, it depends on the vulnerability and the software, how we actually scan for it. But we usually write our own proof of concept code to either test for the vulnerability or to do version detection.
I'm wondering the relationship here and how the CSIRT.global was formed. It's evolved from DIVD, which, for those that don't know, is the Dutch Institute for Vulnerability Disclosure. We didn't spell that out earlier. At least I didn't. So a few things here. This is part of, but separate from DIVD. You're looking at this from a global perspective. Clearly, well, it's not easier to scan the whole internet, but if you're going to scan the internet, you can get it all in one and then figure out where stuff is, perhaps. But I'm just wondering, how is it related to but not related to DIVD? How is it contained but not contained in the Netherlands? How does the global view come into this? And perhaps why your team to pick up this global perspective?
Those are some very good questions. Let me try to get them from the beginning. So DIVD, as stated, is Dutch in nature. That is in part because our founders are Dutch, but they might have been born in Belgium. It might have been a BIVD, right? But the most important thing is that they have a good relation with the government, and the government is kind of offering. They're offering their vouch for us, if you will. And that is a very big thing, because that allows us to do that scanning activity, because we scan indiscriminately, as I said. And legally, it depends very much on the jurisdiction where you are, so where the scanned machine resides, if that is legal or not. So it is for us very important that we contain those activities in a country that vouches for us. And that is also a large part of why those activities, specifically the global scanning, is done from a Dutch infrastructure where the government vouches for us. But that's only part one, because that will give us that IP information. So secondly, it's, when you send your automated bunch of abuse emails, listen, these 40,000 IP addresses we know are infected, so we're trying to do reverse DNS on them and so on and so on, and we find DNS names and we're trying to mail them, and we're getting a lot of emails back. We know that only 1% of those mails is followed up. So when you actually want the findings to be implemented and be followed up by the owners, you need to do more. And for that, we believe that we need to build a network of people and a network of trust.
Well, we not only believe, but that's currently with the AVD, it's how it works in the Netherlands. Like with our 100 volunteers, often when we find something in a bigger company, we're like, hey, do we know anyone that works there? Does anyone have a contact? And that way you can get your information to the right place a lot faster. And it's sort of vouched for, coming from a trusted source. And they're far more willing to listen to you than just a cold email.
This is an interesting point, because it's very easy to get one's head wrapped around the technology and the threats and the attacks and all that fun stuff. But a big part of this challenge is actually knowing who,
yes,
what company, right? Who's behind that IP, and then even harder, who's behind that company that will respond.
And for the Netherlands, we already have a lot of this information. We have a big network, and we noticed that really helps. So with that mission, CSIRT.global was found to create chapters, globally, to build these networks in other places as well.
And we're going to get into, I suspect this is where a lot of people can jump in. We'll save that for the end. Go ahead, Edward. You're going to say something?
Yeah, so, and I think we're pioneering a bunch of other stuff as well, including a national clearinghouse, for example. Because clearinghouse will, if you can automate those follow-ups as much as you can, that will save you a lot of time. We will do any manual follow-up if we need to, but if we can automate it, it would be awesome. So the clearinghouse concept is now being pioneered in the Netherlands and might be very important going forward internationally as well. But of course, we need to learn the lessons from our from the benchmark that we run in the Netherlands as we speak.
You described the process of you scan the internet. I don't know how often you do that, but then some analysis takes place, and a report and some emails get generated. So that's a proactive from your side. Is there a proactive from the other side where folks can query to see if they might be smoldering? So perhaps you can't reach them because the network isn't quite there yet, but somebody might be interested. Maybe, I don't know, as a threat intel feed or as a query, or how is that possible, or how does that look?
No, because we scan the entire internet. Having people probe that data would also give a threat actor the chance to probe this data and get information about potential vulnerabilities. So the only way to do that would be to vet everyone that wants access to the data, for which systems they could get access to it, and then you have to keep that up to date. And that's just a lot of work, and we believe that it would bring more risk than actual good.
Yeah. Although in that clearinghouse, of course, we're trying to implement parts of this in some way, but that is all heavily built on trust and on very strict security controls. So it's not as easy as you just slinging an IP range to our API and getting a bunch of IP addresses in return.
No,
that's not how it works.
Need to vet who owns that range, and with the speed that IPv4 address can change hands, especially if they're hosted by a cloud provider, for instance. Yeah, it's really hard to make sure that the data is not is only being seen by the owner of that system.
So a couple more, and they may seem like ignorant questions, but I'm going to ask them anyway. What stops others who have bad intentions from doing what you're doing?
Nothing.
Are
They do it
you
all the time.
Nothing.
aware of? Are you
They
aware
are.
of any? They are doing
They
that.
they are doing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
They are. I know at any given time, I saw a statistic like at any given time about like 250 scans are, global scans are running. And that is, I've also heard like 4 in 5 is probably malicious. Yeah, and that's the world as it is today. It's the good guys and the bad guys are in a scanning rat race. And we're just trying to be the good guys in that race.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that it has been in the news how, for instance, vulnerabilities in Microsoft Exchange have been used by ransomware gangs, etc. So they go on the internet, they scan for Exchange systems that are vulnerable, just like we do. Only when they find one, they deploy their ransomware, and when we find one, we start trying to get in touch with the owner to remind them to update their server.
Let's talk about some of the cases, because I mean that's where this really matters, right? It's not just that you guys are having fun building some platforms and bringing people together and trying to automate some cool things. You're actually doing some good work here. So I don't know who wants to share a case or 2 or 3 or whatever to kind of help bring this home to reality.
I think one that a lot of people might have heard about would be the Kaseya ransomware case on 4th of July weekend of 2021. That was actually from our own researchers. Wietse Boonstra identified a 0-day in the product, and we were working with the vendor to disclose this to them and have it patched. But sadly, before the patches were rolled out, the vulnerabilities were used by REvil to deploy ransomware, and what is said to have been the biggest ransomware attack up to that point. As they started with a ransom of, I believe, 70 million to release all the systems.
So this was a case where you're actually identifying the 0-day or the vulnerability in the first place as well.
Yes.
Is that common, or is that less likely?
It happens a few times a year, I'd say.
Yeah.
So we run, I don't know, Lennaert, we run over 100 cases per year, right? And a handful of them will be out of our own research.
Yeah.
I think, for reference, is in the Kaseya case, and like Lennaert has worked so hard on that case with all of his colleagues that all the details he's talked about so often. But I think it's relevant because Kaseya was not seen as something that was super mission critical. It would not be in the top 10 of critical software systems ever before that attack.
And the issue is a lot of the victims probably weren't aware that they used it because it was used by their IT partner.
Yeah.
For like
give me some context there so we know why wouldn't have made the top 10 or be a critical, and why would organizations not think that they had it? What's the story there?
Because, well, if it crashes or it would go offline, whatever, then it probably wouldn't directly affect the primary process of most businesses.
Yeah.
Like if you own a factory or something, the computers that give instructions to your production machines, those you think are critical. Because, hey, if those stop working, my very expensive machine stops producing my products. But then at some point, there is another computer that does the maintenance on those computers. And that's where the Kaseya software would run. But yeah, if that one goes down, it wouldn't directly affect your production process. Yeah. But in this case, it didn't go down. It was used to deploy ransomware across the network, which would have affected the production server.
So there were thousands, or I think maybe 1,000 or maybe even 2,000 MSPs who were deploying that software on their customers' networks. So ultimately, there were tens of thousands of enterprises, small, medium, that were affected by that Kaseya incident. And
it was managed by the MSP, therefore they didn't know the components were deployed or not.
Exactly. So Kaseya, as a software company, came to our attention, and the MSP community as a whole came to our attention in that way as well. It is definitely, I think, a community, especially if you're talking to smaller MSPs, that can use a little bit more help with regards to security, just to say it mildly.
Yeah, not necessarily only the branch, but also like the software they're using. We've looked at various MSP type software products because Kaseya got us kind of curious. We realized, hey, you can have a really big impact if one of these things are broken because it's so widespread. You only need to find one breach and you can affect hundreds, maybe thousands of customers behind that. So it was really, in that sense, it's really a force multiplier for how much impact it can have. And we looked at a few other products that are the same type of software. And I'm sad to say that in the most of the ones we looked at, we did end up finding things.
Yeah, and I mean, supply chain has been a huge topic lately. SolarWinds, another example of something similar,
Exactly.
right? And maybe a few more cases, and we can talk about what other things you might glean on top of the individual cases. Any other stories you can share?
I think we scanned for most of the major vulnerabilities that have been published about, like the recent, well, not really recent anymore, earlier this year, the 0 day of unauthenticated remote code execution in Atlassian Confluence. We've had multiple cases for issues with Exchange servers. Yeah, like pretty much all the big CVEs that have been published. We've scanned the internet for and tried to warn owners of systems.
And the reason why I think those scans, specifically the big numbers, resonate is, for example, in the press, people are always super interested to learn that, let's say, after a week, there's still 70% of the machines we initially detected were still not patched, for example.
Like Log4j?
For example, I think it went a little bit faster, but the interesting thing is that we're trying to beat the drum on taking as much responsibility as you can with regards to patching and keeping your system updated and so on. And it helps that we have access to those statistics, of course.
And I think it's also really good to reflect on those statistics to see, like, hey, even if we identify things, look how long it takes before things get patched.
Yeah, so talk to me a little bit about that. What are some of the trends you're seeing, bigger picture stats, and the thing I was thinking of earlier is, do you see an opportunity to find perhaps, like you were looking at, are there MSP-driven software components that are just so widespread that there may not be anything noted in the media yet, but this is probably an area that we should be looking at?
I think MSP software is definitely an area that we should look at. Trends-wise, I see that a lot of the big ISPs are very willing to work with us. Like when we identify an IP address with a vulnerability in it, oftentimes the first point of contact would be the ISP who owns that address. So when it's in AWS, that might be Amazon, or it might be Microsoft or Google. We noticed that these hosting parties are far more willing to send our meshes on to their end customer than they were, let's say, 2 years ago. It really feels like they're getting used to what we're doing. They're starting to know us, and they're just more willing to help than before.
And that's also down to the fact, I reckon, Sean, as what Lennaert said, is that after a while, they start to understand that when we send an email to them, it's always going to be a relevant email. Because we don't send out any marketing messaging, we don't send out any spam or event invites or whatever. When you get an email from us, it's because something is smothering in your infrastructure. And so that's one thing. That was from the beginning, but now they're starting to get used to that when you get an email from us, you should pay notice. So what we're now on is on that mission to build that trust in that name, CSIRT.global. That's why I'm repeating it, to make that global trust. Because people now, our promise to people is that we're not going to send them anything unless it's relevant. And they should probably do something right away. And if we can get that message out, that's for us already a huge win.
So talk to me about how you do that. And I know You briefly touched on chapters perhaps coming. So what are some of the things you're doing where you could use the help of the community, perhaps other disclosure agencies, perhaps government entities? Who should get involved? How can they get involved?
So yeah, I think what we need is to essentially, if we build a chapter, that is a geographical structuring of all the scan data that we have, essentially. And if we can offload an entire IP range, geographical IP range to a chapter, that will bring us speed and scalability. So that's one of the important goals that we have. But what we do know as well is that not everything is organized geographically, of course. And as a matter of fact, on the internet, almost nothing is organized geographically. So because that's why we build partnerships and friendships as well. For example, in the last week, we talked to the MSP community exactly about these things that we talk about today. And they've offered their friendship in the beginning, but later on, if we're building automated channels where the trust is already there, that we can send our information to, we then have a horizontal slicing instead of a vertical slicing, if you will. And that's what we're trying to do. For us, the IP data that we have and all the scanning data that we have is a huge chessboard. We have vertical columns, we have horizontal columns, and we're trying to fill it as efficient as possible so that we can cover the entire world in any which way is necessary. And the chapter structure is very important because depending on where you are, there's many different rules and regulation. And Sean, you already touched base on this. Until a few weeks ago, it was quite illegal to do even ethical hacking in the US. And even what's out there today is only a proposal. And so it really depends on where you are, what you can and what you cannot do. And for that, we need to find specific localized solutions. Many of them will have a solid legal component as well. And that translates to effort and sometimes specialist effort. So even though we're a volunteer-led organization and nobody makes money, we still need some funding for that as well. And we've estimated every chapter on average will at least cost some stuff for all the legal and setup costs. And there's many countries in the world, many different cultures, and so on. So that's what we're trying to achieve, is find the good-heartedness and the willingness to help, either in person or with funding or whatever, to help us build the organization out globally.
Well, the friendships and partnerships seem like the best place to start. Certainly, the money helps, but if you can get the knowledge and the experience in the region or the sector or the whatever the slice may be, to help navigate how to reach the people, how to disclose effectively without breaking any laws or cultural barriers, right? I think those would be great. And yeah, I think hopefully folks listening, we definitely have an international audience. So hopefully folks listening will take notice and hopefully connect with you and the team to see how they might be able to help. I'm thinking of a lot of the practitioners that also listen to Redefining Cybersecurity here. And perhaps they're thinking selfishly as they need to, right? How do I perhaps leverage this for my own security operations? So there's no pull mechanism for them, as we described, but how might a security practitioner or a security leader like a CISO get involved so that they can not only benefit, but perhaps even contribute to the cause as well?
Well, some already have. So, for example, 3 very forward-thinking people in the UK working in critical infrastructure have decided to come on board and start the first chapter for CSIRT.global. So they decided to help the cause and invest their time and effort. What they get in return is, of course, is access to a fantastic community. But also, we don't mind anyone who will, build their own personal credibility because they're doing this work with us. That's also part of the reward that you get. But in essence, I reckon, since we're very much in the beginning, like we don't have 100 chapters already. I reckon it's going to be a large part of people who just believe in a good cause, and that is also the reason that we're here is that no one else is really doing this. There's many volunteer organizations of many types surrounding the internet and surrounding cybersecurity. But really, volunteer global firefighting, we're the only organization I know of that actually does this in an apolitical and discriminate way. So, if you believe in the internet, if you reckon that it needs to survive all this shenanigans that has been going on for the last decade or two, you might as well go ahead and help. And if you don't have the time, but you do have deep pockets, you can, of course, send me an email as well.
It's always that. And Lennaert, I want to, I don't want to take away from that. The funding is important, so please, anyone who can help on that front, definitely consider that. Lennaert, I want to talk to you about as we begin to wrap here, the involvement from the hacker community, because there's a lot going on underneath, I presume. And even so, you do a scan, you uncover some smoldering stuff. What do? How do you communicate that, right? What's really going on? How widespread is that smolder, that fire? How do you then translate that into a message that somebody on the receiving end can do something with? That requires work as well, and I presume some of the hacker community would be perfect to help do that analysis and the translation to help say this is your path forward away from the fire. Is that right?
Yeah. So it depends, of course, a lot on what is going on. If it's a 0 day that is being actively exploited, but there's no patch available, then our advice would always be, take the system offline or remove it from the public internet, because there's simply nothing else you can do. But if it's an older vulnerability and there's already a patch available, which is luckily most of the time the case, then we will send along instructions to patch and information about which version numbers are safe and which ones aren't. So yeah, we mail the owners of vulnerable systems a nice little report with instructions like what's going on, what's the impact, why you should take this serious, and how you can remediate it.
Well, listen, I think there's no question this is something critical to the livelihood of the internet, as Eward mentioned, and I'm grateful that you and the rest of the team are doing the work that you're doing. I'm sure that those that you've actually connected with are thankful as well. when they didn't want to receive that communication, but eventually we're grateful that they did, and hopefully that number doesn't rise to a point where you can't scale ahead of it. But we know that things aren't tamping down anytime soon. So the numbers are rising, the criticalities are rising, the sectors are rising. So something like a CSIRT.global is definitely necessary. And thanks for doing what you're doing, and thanks for joining me here on Redefining Cybersecurity. Eward, maybe a final point, a call to action for folks if you want.
Well, no, I was just super happy that we could talk about this. Within the next few days and the next week, we're all going to huddle together in the Netherlands at MCH Hacker Camp. Many of the people who are volunteering for us are going to be there as well. So if some of your listeners would happen to be in the vicinity, address anyone with a black t-shirt with a yellow DIVD logo, and we'll help you further gladly.
Great call to action, and sounds like a great event as well. So for those listening to the show, there'll be notes, of course, as we always put in there. We'll link to CSIRT.global, the IBD, perhaps the con as well, and anything else that Eward and Lennaert think would be helpful. So thanks everybody for listening. Thanks Eward and Lennaert for joining. Catch you on the next Redefining Cybersecurity.
Asgardia by WSO2 is a developer-focused identity and access management solution. Offered as Identity as a Service, or IDaaS, Asgardia by WSO2 creates seamless login experiences to your apps in minutes.
Imperva is the cybersecurity leader whose mission is to protect data and all paths to it with a suite of integrated application and data security solutions. Learn more at imperva.com.
HITRUST is a leading data protection standards development and certification organization that strives to safeguard sensitive information and manage information risk for global organizations across all industries and throughout the third-party supply chain. Learn more at hitrustalliance.net. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Redefining Security podcast. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share itspmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.